Hello and welcome to the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. I'm Jack Morgan, alongside me, Dylan Pfister. And the Duquesne Dukes, they're going to have a tough task ahead of them playing the Maine Black Bears at home on Wednesday night. Duquesne comes off a win against Delaware last week. They also lost to St. Peter's in a pretty close game, but it was a loss nonetheless. They sit at 2-7. They're trying to get things going and kind of build off that first win in the U.S. this year and the first win at home. Dylan, obviously, they won that game. They won it pretty handily. What did they do right in that one to win that?
Well, there was a lot of resilience in that game, Jack, and I like that you talked about how they won it handedly, but that wasn't clear off the bat. They definitely struggled. That first half, the score, it was 37-36. Delaware was up. Duquesne would go into that second half 44-29 scoring-wise. That's big in part due to the resilient shooting from Trey Dinkins, and the entire team showed a lot of I don't want to just keep saying resilience, but that's what it was. They came back so well in that game in so many different ways, but it truly was the shooting ability of Trey Dinkins, specifically in that second half. But in the entire game, he had 18 points, went 4 for 9 from the three-point line. He was the difference maker in that one. Also had 5 rebounds as well. In Dinkins, alongside Crawford as well, big part of why Duquesne was able to beat Delaware and really have a big momentum swinger in their season in that win.
Yeah, it definitely could be qualified as a big momentum swing. I think, obviously, we might have to wait a little bit on that. But Duquesne also went 0-6 to start off the season in conference play in 23-24. But they're able to turn it around. And actually, ironically, talked to Kareem Rozier about that, and he kind of said, he said they could take some lessons from last year. And Drew Joyce then ended up saying it's a different year, but obviously you take some lessons from that. But just the overarching themes of why Duquesne had been off to such a poor start, I think at least, we're rebounding offensively, just not enough. You kind of share those kind of themes?
Yeah.
Or have you seen anything more?
I like that you brought up the rebounding, Jack, but I actually want to look at the defensive rebounding. I really think that's where the Dukes have truly been struggling, because you look at where they stand in the A-10, they're 6th in team offensive reboundings, but they're dead last, 15th in defensive rebounds, only 213 on the year. Next place is UMass with 243. So they're 30 behind. Not only are they last, they're 30 behind the next place. That's really been the struggle for them. And now, what's one guy that's actually helped that case? Maximus Edwards, a guy who hasn't really gotten a lot of love as a new transfer to this Duquesne team. They've been talking about his offensive struggles, maybe not some great takes going, down into the paint. But you look at him, he's got 32 defensive rebounds. He leads the team in that category. But I also want to talk about last year. You mentioned last year, Jack, that this was a team that showed a lot of resilience and throughout the season was able to kind of fight against that 0-5 start in the conference record there. They also ranked very poorly in defensive rebounds last year. So this isn't anything new for the Dukes. They ranked 13th last season. So these are some repetitive struggles we're seeing, whether that's in the repeated personnel we've seen returning this year, whether that's in a scheme fit that has carried over from team to team. I don't really know, but it's something that would be really mindful. It could be very mindful of them to turn that around in trying to turn their season around.
Certainly those defensive rebounds, like you said, they turned to offensive. And Duquesne has, in the games they've lost, it feels like they've been dominating on offensive glass. I know that they trailed by a significant margin in terms of offensive rebounds in the game against St. Peter's that they did lose. But overall, I think you're right. I think Duquesne has had struggles in a lot of areas. There haven't been many that they've excelled in. But obviously, it feels like that game against Delaware, like we said, they started to turn the page a little bit, if you might say.
You're certainly right, Jack. Yeah, in that second half, they not only did they flip the scoring, but they flipped their own shooting. They went from 15% from the three-point line in the first half to 43 the second half. So I talked about Trey Dinkins. That's where his impact came into play. Obviously, that was huge for them. Mind you, a team you mentioned struggles in a lot of areas. 15th, dead last in scoring and in team field goal percentage. Not dead last, but 14th in the three-point percentage. So seeing them make that jump against Delaware, that's big for a team that's struggled in that area all season.
We'll turn our attention here to Maine. So obviously Maine, they're 6-5. They played a couple of teams in the A10. They last played Fordham, and this was actually on Sunday. They ended up losing to them 87-72. However, this is their third time around against an A10 team. They're going to be on the road on Wednesday, obviously against Duquesne, also against Canisius on Saturday, and then Stony Brook. So they're in the middle of a pretty long road trip. So, Maine, what kind of jumps out to you when you look at them, stat-wise, seeing them play? What jumps out to you about the Maine Black Bears?
The main thing that jumps out to me, the main two things I should say, is the defense and the execution. And those things coincide with each other. You really can't have a good defense without good execution. They lead this conference, they lead the American East in free throw percentage. And that's a category where Duquesne has really struggled.
Yes.
That just goes to show you the execution this team puts in. They're shooting 82% from the line, and they're also number one on the defensive side of the ball. Two statistics that are just showing you that they really cross those T's and dot those I's, allowing only 66 points per game. And that's what Duquesne has been putting up as they're the lowest in their conference in scoring. So that's definitely a big leg up that they will have, that the Maine Black Bears will have on the Dukes.
Yeah, and I think we were talking before the pregame show, and it almost feels like it has the feel of a defensive battle. And for Duquesne, their defense hasn't been great. It hasn't been awful, but it hasn't really bailed them out of some bad offensive performances. So definitely Maine probably comes into this one thinking they have a heck of a shot.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Duquesne's defense is nothing special, but it has kind of been a savior for them. They are 7th in their conference, allowing 70 points per game. So it's around that mark of the Black Bears. Obviously not as strong as them. They are 8th in the turnover margin as well. Obviously, if that was in the American East Conference, that would be close to dead last, but we know they're in the A10, 15 teams. So that turnover margin's been big for the Dukes, and it could come up big for them in this game. It's going to need to if they're going to beat a really good defense in the Black Bears.
And Duquesne does have a few guys that can get out and run. So, obviously, and Joyce said this after the game against Delaware, they kind of were able to get out and run and kind of operate their offense more fast-paced. And that works out for a team like Duquesne. There's a lot of sprinters on that team. So, in terms of Maine and guys they have, players they have, who jumps out to you the most? Who are you watching for the Maine Black Bears in this one?
Well, I mean, this team has guys that can contribute not only off the bench, but they just have their stars. They got A.J. Lopez coming off 24 points, was a loss to Fordham, but again, big performance, leads the team in scoring. He averages 14, so he's been huge. But I want to talk about a guy who's been a little bit more contributive for the team in all areas. That's Keon Burns, 2nd on the team in scoring, leads the team in both offensive and defensive rebounds, averaging 6.4 per game. That would be 2nd on the Dukes, so very dominant in that category. He's also 3rd on the team in three-pointers. So this is a guy that's firing from all cylinders. He can beat you in any area. Keon Burns probably going to have a big game against the Dukes.
In 6 of his last 7 games, Kellen Tynes has put up double figures. The exception being 5 against Fordham in a 15-point loss, so you see what happens when he doesn't put up those numbers. I think that is more the reason why they need Tynes to step up in this game. He has been a important part of their offense when they have won games. So I think that Tynes is going to be someone they're going to have to get going in order to win this one. We'll shift the focus to Duquesne. Who are you looking for on the Duke side of things?
I think a big performance from Chabby Beret would be huge for the Dukes because I mentioned those rebounding struggles. He's first on the team in that category. He's averaging 6.6 rebounds per game. Recently got that start at home. Obviously, that was big for him. Big for the team as he contributed in that one. I think he needs to contribute again because I talked about it, Jack. Those defensive rebounds, been a struggle. They need a big man to start contributing in that area more significantly, and I think Beret is that guy.
I think it's actually been really inspiring to see Beret, and especially just the journey he's had to have been through. Last year, obviously, with the heart troubles, and he comes back now. Doesn't get many minutes, but he's made the most of them. He's jumped Wilburn, he's jumped Dixon, and now he's got that starting spot. And I think, with the way he's played lately, I think he could be here to stay. But I'm going to go in the direction of Kareem Rozier. I think that he has to continue to be a leader, and I think he's really jumped more into that role in terms of being a leader of this team and starting, consistently and earning that starting spot. I think he really has. I think he does a lot of the intangibles on the court. He does more than what shows up on the stat sheet. I really think that he's got to have a big game for the Dukes, not with just points rather, but assists, getting out in transition, shooting a nice healthy percentage. I think that's what the Dukes need. I think they need Rozier to have a heck of a game, and I think that he has a good chance to against this Maine team. And it kind of looks like it's going to be a defensive battle, kind of a dogfight. Kareem Rozier is a dog with a W, very good player, and I think that he's going to have to come up large this time around. We'll get to our score predictions now, Dylan. Duquesne versus Maine. Who comes out on top? They rhyme, ironically. Who comes out on top?
I think it's going to be closer when I talked about the defenses and the offenses. Duquesne, obviously, they allow 70 points per game usually. It's been what they've been giving up. As for the Black Bears, number one defense, only allowing 66 points per game. I think it's going to be a dogfight, like you said. I think it's going to come down to, at the very end of the game, who's going to be able to execute better, and that, I believe, is going to be the Maine Black Bears, as we've seen it to this point. Talked about the free throws, talked about the defense, but they've got a really nice bench as well. Keelan Steele, as well as Killian Gribben, both coming off the bench. They only average about 10, 15 points a game, but they both shoot above 65% just coming off the bench. It's guys like that I think are going to lift this team above the Dukes in this one. Going for a win. Again, 65-60, the Maine Black Bears over the Dukes.
I think you were right in one extremely important facet of that prediction, and that is that it's going to come down to the final 4 minutes. Duquesne has been in a lot of final 4-minute situations where they have had a chance to win games. It was talked about in the last post-game press conference where they have been in these games so many times before, and they just felt like they had been there enough. They knew what they were doing. They used those final 4 minutes to catapult themselves over Delaware on Friday when they're kind of staging a little bit of a late-game comeback themselves, and you're like, uh-oh. Here we go again. I think that's not going to happen this time around. I think Duquesne is starting to come a little more into their own, and it's happening at the perfect time with conference play coming up on New Year's Eve. I think Duquesne wins this one by 7. I think they close it out, and they hit their free throws this time at the end of the game. That'll do it for the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. For Dylan Pfister, I'm Jack Morgan saying so long and enjoy the game.